Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the webinar for the Innovative Fund Solutions in an Uncertain World. My name is Tom Wight. I will be moderating the panel today. I invite you to submit your questions as we go along, and we will allocate time at the end of the session to answer these. To give you a brief background, I've been in the business for financial industry for 40 years. I've been a trader. I've been a salesman. I've been a fund manager. I've built trading platforms. I build online trading platforms as well. And I've worked in New York, Malta, Tokyo, San Francisco, London. So I have a lot of experience. And so I've been in Malta for 10 years, or 20 years, I'm sorry, but doing this non-executive directorship for 10 years, and I think I'm well qualified to speak to this market, and I know everybody, everything there is to know about Malta almost.
My name is Xuereb. I'm the Business Development Manager at p.l.c. Fund Services. We are Malta's leading fund administration provider, and we provide fund setup and solutions as well as a full suite of administration services from calculation of NAV to preparation of financial statements to company secretarial and all other back office regulatory reporting that is required.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joseph Saliba. I am one of the co-founding partners of Saliba Stafrace Legal. It's a boutique law firm in Malta, which started 5 years ago. And our core areas are typically the financial services sector, corporate law, and also property development and planning.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francesco Bettoni. I work for p.l.c, which is an asset manager based in the UK.
So the first question is, what's the first impact? What's the first impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the financial services industry in general, and more specifically on the fund industry in Malta? And it's a great question. And is this expected to leave any material negative or repercussions on the growth of such industry in the foreseeable future? And it's a great question, and I would love to hear the answers from the panelists.
To answer the first question in terms of the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, I mean, this impact has been worldwide and across all sectors, including, of course, the financial services and funds industry. I mean, we as p.l.c. Fund Services, as I mentioned, we are a fund administrator first and foremost. So our experience insofar as the effects of the virus is very much based on the experience of our clients and what they have been going through. I mean, luckily enough, to a certain extent, we had a bit of time because the virus only hit Maltese shores a little while after the outbreak in other countries. So we had a bit of time to prepare as a country, to prepare as an industry, as a business, and as a company. This is not to say, of course, that there weren't any negative effects. I mean, in fact, we've had a number of funds whose NAV did decrease and take a hit due to the volatilities in the market and the negative impacts on a lot of sectors. We had other clients who seemed to ride the wave pretty well, and others who immediately started looking at opportunities to place investments in areas of potential growth that could potentially benefit during this time. I mean, an example that comes to mind immediately is that of technology. So in the time where remote working has become a reality for most people, the importance of technology has been magnified immensely. Now, of course, I mean, we are returning a little bit to normal and returning to the office, but up until a few weeks ago, everybody was working from home where this was possible, and this includes as well our regulator. Over there, we even saw a couple of efficiencies, of improvements in terms of accessibility and speaking with the regulator, because even, for example, we had an application that we submitted on behalf of a client for a new share class, and we got the authorization in no time at all, which was even quicker than in normal times. So there are lessons being learned during this time, which is a positive thing. And insofar as the funds industry is concerned, yes, there have been some negative impacts in terms of performance. Yes, certain projects were put on hold, but what we're seeing now is that we are starting to see our clients resume again with those projects that they have put on hold. Industry players seem to be accepting the fact that this scenario, this period shall pass as well. And in the same way that the Maltese economy, the local economy, is forecast to bounce back very, very quickly, so too can the funds industry return to its positive state of momentum and growth.
So, in reply to the first question, I must admit that now I can appear quite relaxed about it, because obviously now I'm talking with the hindsight of 3 months, but initially it took us all very much by surprise. We didn't know what it was, how dramatic its effects could be. Honestly, most of those questions remain unanswered from a medical perspective. Also, the long-term effects on the economy and the financial system is very much up in the air and very, very uncertain. It all depends on a number of variables and contingencies which are very much outside our control, including when and how the vaccine will be found, the continuous reaction of governments to this whole situation. Now we're seeing everything opening up slowly. Malta has its own realities, economic realities, even its quite high concentration on tourism, which, as you can imagine, it has its own impact. I must say, though, that from a financial services aspect, the funds industry itself, our greatest fear initially was the impact it would have operationally, logistically, and luckily that wasn't the case. So far, I think we could all witness how operationally everything could run very smoothly. Rebecca mentioned the regulator. I myself had my own difficult, tough meetings, and even the nice introductory meetings with the regulator. They were very, very much there, present, ready to accommodate. They still gave us the meetings with 2-3 weeks notice for new clients. Naturally, it was all virtual. Initially, it all appeared quite awkward. I must say that nowadays, even talking to my colleagues, to other stakeholders in the whole industry, we can also see the benefits of that all. We've discovered new working methodologies, which leave us thinking that maybe even after COVID-19 has become history, we could still continue to adopt some of this, because it has its own advantages in its own right. The incentives from government, from the tax authorities, obviously have had their own importance to alleviate the whole burden. Then the long-term effects on the fund industry, difficult to predict, as I said. Naturally, the meltdown, the very temporary meltdown that we've experienced in the markets, which could very well return with the second wave of the pandemic, we could have a second wave of that. Naturally, it will have its own negative impacts on some portfolios, but we will definitely, and I say this from experience, even from the 10-year-old financial crisis now, it will bring about new opportunities, new investment opportunities, new fund structuring opportunities, because obviously every crisis brings about its own opportunities. And that's where I see Malta continue to strengthening its very strategic position in this respect of accommodating new requests and even innovative ones in the most innovative and uncertain scenarios.
And these, of course, have been challenging times for us as well. We run 3 seekers based in Malta, and of course, this pandemic had a impact on us. Firstly, it was given by the volatility, so our activity had to adapt in order not to reduce losses and perhaps also find new opportunities, as just mentioned by Rebecca and Joseph. I would like to add our own experience to add value to what Rebecca and Joseph just said. I believe we're really happy to see the reaction of the MFSA and the fund administrator during the crisis, because we did not experience any major delay or interruption of the service that we had with them. For example, I reported with the board meeting and the investment committee, and instead of going to Malta as we normally do, the meeting took place on Zoom, which worked exactly the same way. It worked fine. So we were impressed and happy to see how all these events didn't actually have an impact on the operational side and on the logistics side of it, because of course we at first around 90% of our employees they started working from home, which is something that we were not used to. So we did have to adapt, but I think both on our side and the MFSA and the fund administrator, I think everything worked out smoothly. Regarding the future of Malta, I personally do not see any negative impact in the long term, as I believe, as Joseph was just saying, I believe these will bring more opportunities in the future especially for new fund managers, because I believe Malta is because of its structure, flexible fund structures, and because of the lower cost compared to other jurisdictions, I believe more and more startup managers will choose Malta over other jurisdictions.
All right. So next question is, okay, speaking about Malta, I mean, what are the major attractions that Malta can offer to fund promoters in the present economic and uncertainty globally, given its size? Okay, so this is another great question, because we're obviously in competition with other jurisdictions, and so why Malta?
So in making the key strategic decision that is choosing a fund domicile, there are a number of considerations that need to be made. Each industry player, each fund, each asset manager has its own unique set of qualities, which the same is said for each jurisdiction. So this makes one perhaps the ideal jurisdiction for one player and not necessarily for the other. And in this choice of domicile, there isn't one single factor that underpins this choice, but it's rather a variety of factors that, when put together, they can create the right environment. Factors such as cost efficiency, as Francesco was mentioning, flexible structures, technical infrastructure, legal framework, and other considerations as well. And this is precisely the case for Malta, because when I think of Malta's advantages, I don't just think of one point, but it's rather a number of factors that together they create the package called Malta and make it quite an interesting and compelling one, especially for the niche market which has been built for small to medium-sized managers. Now, of course, Malta is part of the EU and has been for the past 15 years or so I will not explain why perhaps it is beneficial to set up an alternative investment fund or use its scheme here, as that is a level playing field across the EU. However, despite this playing field, there have been important inroads that Malta has made in the funds industry, especially by way of innovation in fund structures and in catering for, as I mentioned, this niche market of the small to medium-sized managers. For example, when the Alternative Investment Fund Managers Directive was implemented those years ago, Malta didn't simply replace the old with the new, but being one of the first to implement the new, also maintained the old. Now, by the old, what I mean is the Professional Investor Fund regime, which is a regime available to those managers falling out of scope of the directive, so managing less than the threshold of 100 or 500 million. And it is beneficial to them because they can benefit from lighter regulation, more flexible regulation. For example, there are no diversification requirements, no investment restrictions, no leverage restrictions. And because of these less onerous regulations, they then also benefit from more efficiencies in terms of cost, in terms of flexibility and time to market as well. Now that was one example. Another example of a unique structure would be the notified alternative investment fund regime. And now this is available to those managers that are indeed captured by the Alternative Investment Fund Managers Directive, the AIFMD, and it is a fast-track solution for them to setting up an alternative investment fund, because from submitting a full suite of application of documents to the MFSA, the regulator, this regulator is committed to a maximum 10-day time frame in which to include the fund on the list of notified AIFs, at which point the fund can launch. But this fund is not a fund that is subject to ongoing supervision, but rather the regulator is placing full reliance on the manager who was already heavily regulated by the EU regulation. Now, apart from these innovative, if you will, fund vehicles and typologies that are available, there are also other advantages and favorable considerations, which perhaps may seem simpler, but they are still very, very important in a practical context. One example would be the English language. In Malta, we have two official languages, one being Maltese, our national language, and the second being English. And business is done in English, fund documentation is drafted in English, and even our laws are written in both Maltese and English. So the language barriers that might exist in other jurisdictions are not so much of a concern over here. So when we take into consideration the factors that we have discussed, being the cost efficiencies, time to market considerations, technical infrastructure, lack of language barriers in this case, a pro-business approach from the regulator, and we couple these with other considerable advantages such as economic stability or the size of the industry itself and other factors which I'm sure my colleagues now will be elaborating on. These are the factors, this is what makes up Malta as a jurisdiction and what renders it attractive and as an ideal jurisdiction for the small to medium-sized managers.
Okay, just building up on what Rebecca was saying and even Francesco before that, I won't reinvent the wheel here. Everyone knows what the main points of attraction Malta has to offer are, and these are definitely this niche market it has positioned itself into, catering very well for the small to medium-sized managers and fund promoters who have their specific needs. In terms of the cost consciousness, the fact that they are startups typically, they could be layoffs from big institutions, very well experienced in my own practice, having their own dream, having their own adventurous path ahead. And in times of uncertainty, these definitely do not come less. It's rather the contrary. We see more and more of these mushrooming, but they come with these specific requirements: cost effectiveness, flexibility to accommodate their dreams, definitely. And yes, Malta has very much of that to offer, in the sense that, let me start off by saying, just to clear it off, Malta is not a wholesale fund domicile, and we do not compete with the wholesale fund domiciles. We are not Luxembourg, another Luxembourg or Ireland in Europe. Malta has its own niche market. Its infrastructure is very well praised, yet it's got its own limitations, including size limitations. So, no, we can't offer the choices of prime brokers or banks in the same quantity and numbers that the other fund domiciles can offer. And yet, in so many respects, when we meet these smaller managers in their startup periods, they're not very much concerned about that. I mean, they can easily adapt to that. They cannot really easily adapt themselves to very high costs. They cannot very easily adapt themselves to anything but a flexible structure. Rebecca mentioned the p.l.c. structure. I wanted to say that the p.l.c. structure, yes, I agree with the policy decision taken at the time to keep it on. It's the old structure. It accounts for Malta's success story in the funds industry. But just to mention a few flexibilities of the p.l.c. structure, it's practically the fact that, for example, the service providers for a PIF can all be located outside Malta. You'd have your fund structure located here, but yet you want to use your custody bank or your bankers outside of Malta. That can be done, obviously, with the AIFMD, with the AIFM directive. It cannot be done anymore in the AIF context, but with PIFs, you can still do it. And we see clients insisting on something of the sort. The PIF had very long ago, even before AIFMD itself, recognized that some fund structures simply do not warrant the appointment of a custodian with its associated costs. The typical private equity fund structure, the typical property fund structure, and that is allowable under the PIF. Still getting your regulated product, but without all of this. Naturally, then you don't have the passport, fine. But you still have a product which, if European distribution is not so adamantly important, or you have your own distribution plans which can be accommodated without the passport, which is very much what happens in a professional fund context, then you might not even need that much the passport and go for these flexibilities which bring about in the most natural way cost effectiveness. I just wanted to say as well about the PIF that particularly something interesting for fund promoters coming from outside the European Union, in the very near future it could be the UK itself, that although it is typically they're available for the smaller managers, the de minimis managers, it is also right now available also for non-EU managers, whatever their size. And that could be something very appealing, and we've seen it appeal to non-EU managers coming from all over the globe, except Europe, which could, as I said, also include very soon the UK.
Well, our experience with Malta is it's now been more than 15 years that we work with Malta. We opened the first CCAP between 2004 and 2005. So I can say that we do have quite a lot of experience with it. And we've seen the improvements throughout this time as well. I don't want to repeat what Rebecca and Joseph said, explained very well about the advantages and about the niche market that Malta is offering. But something that I would like to add is the approachability, which has been mentioned before, but I would like to focus on this because I think it's very important, especially for startup managers. So just open the first fund, so maybe they don't have that much experience, and they need more help than well-established funds. So I think Malta is offering a great service, which is because this is a niche market and it's smaller than other jurisdictions. We experienced a almost one-to-one service between the fund manager and both the regulator and the fund administrator. So I think this is something that we noticed throughout the years. It was like this when we first started, and it's still the case nowadays. That's the first reason why we chose Malta back then. Was because of the lower costs, which are very important when you decide to start the fund. I'm talking about small size fund, and the structures. So the PIF structure was something that attracted us, and that's actually the main reason why we chose Malta in the first place. And then we had throughout the years we did experience all we did witness what Rebecca and Joseph just explained very well.
You know, since I had been a trader and a fund manager, and a salesman, and I'd worked on big trading floors. And one of the things that happens when you leave these institutions is you suddenly are alone. And then you realize that all those people that were buzzing around you on the trading floor are no longer there, and you never quite knew what they did. And then you find out what they did, and they make sure the lights went on, they made sure Bloomberg was hooked up, and they made sure that your trade settled, and they made sure, your NAV was done, and all those things. And that's the thing when as a trader, when you leave and you go out on your own, you need that support system. And in a place like Malta, where I can see a major selling point is that there are people on the other end of the phone. And I'm trying to be really speaking from personal experience. I cannot be more honest about this. The fact that you can pick up the phone when you're sitting there alone trading a book, and somebody picked it up the last time you called that same number, it means the world. And this is why places like Luxembourg and everything scare me, because you just don't get the same person. But in Malta, you do. And it's just a huge selling point. And if you're trying to start a new company, it's scary. And and you need someone on the other end of the phone. And Malta is one of those places where there's someone on the other end of the phone. And that's, to me, is one of the biggest selling points of Malta. So I hope that resonates. So, and then of course we have to deal with the question of Brexit and how Malta would position itself in light of Brexit. And this is it's a tough question, and so I'll put it to the panelists because it's sort of a how long is a piece of string type thing. But I think they have some ideas, so I'll leave it to them.
There are, yes, a number of uncertainties that still remain, but the ultimate fact is that the UK has exited the EU, and whatever arrangements are reached over the coming months, the UK will not enjoy the same level of freedom that it has in the past within the EU market. For the financial services sector in particular, Malta has been considered particularly attractive for the reasons that myself, Joseph, and Francesco have mentioned as well in our previous discussions. But beyond that, there's also this particular bond between Malta and Britain, because this goes back many, many years, with Malta enjoying British presence historically for a number of centuries. And as a former British colony, this is thus why Malta has adopted the English language. But we've also adopted an administrative and legal system that is quite similar to the UK system. Even in everyday life, one may find remnants of British presence, for example, the red telephone booths and the post office boxes, and even the fact that we drive on the same side of the road. And the relationship between the two countries does not stop there. With the UK having now exited the EU, the Malta-UK relationship is, in my view, still set to thrive, with a number of bilateral agreements between the countries. And even as a business environment, it's also very positive and evidenced already by the number of UK companies present here.
I must add that for us, who obviously we're on the receiving end of getting business, so we go out there in various jurisdictions doing our own road shows and meeting people, setting the one-to-one meetings and seminars. The good thing about the UK is obviously that it's one of those jurisdictions where you don't really need to go and explain where Malta is, what we do in Malta. Language difficulties have already been mentioned, non-existent. Because yes, sometimes happens that we're not very much on the map, on the geographical map for some jurisdictions, Far East, etc., who wouldn't know us. So the Brits know us very well. They've been doing business with us. They've been using Malta as a vehicle, domicile, tried and tested. So all of that remains, and they know it will remain also after Brexit. I don't think that much of the equation we've been talking about will change, in the sense that I don't think we're after all, we're not after UK-driven business in the likes of something huge, which really needs a huge infrastructure. I think what will remain appealing for fund promoters in the UK will remain the fact that we can accommodate a number of peculiarities, a number of requirements, typically put forward by startups, by small and medium-sized. That's where we can really excel. However, even in that respect, and even in respect of the structuring flexibilities, we do offer even solutions which the Brits are very well familiar with, even from Cayman, even when it comes to the umbrella fund structures, even when it comes to the protected cell structures, incorporated cell structures, incubatory and fund hosting possibilities, which further reduce their costs. So all of that, I'm pretty sure it will have its own marking on Brits.
I can add something here. So Brexit obviously added uncertainty to our business. Since we have our investment managers is UK based. I believe Malta, because of the reasons already mentioned by Joseph and Rebecca, which are historical links, same language, which is I think definitely a good point. And also, I believe that the business law, UK business law, is very similar to the Maltese one, which is definitely an advantage if fund managers think of relocate or even just open a fund in Malta.
So it's been. I appreciate the discussion, and I think we covered the topic well. However, I would like to go back and ask the panelists if there's anything additional they would like to add, and you know, as it pertains to Malta and what Malta can add as a jurisdiction for people that are looking to set up their companies here. And so I open the floor to them.
Yeah, so I mean, what we've spoken about today include various challenges. We've spoken about Brexit and the uncertainties there. We've spoken about the effects of the pandemic and the situation. And I mean, such challenges have always existed in the industry, and we continue to face them. And today, I think, apart from the current environment and the Brexit uncertainty, which we've discussed, there's also rapid advancements in technology and the introduction of regulatory updates, which continue to be the major challenges facing us. But there are also good opportunities, I think. They are the greatest opportunities facing us as well. Opportunities for the future and a positive outlook of the Maltese industry to continue to grow and to continue to strengthen its position as an alternative fund domicile of choice.
Okay, Joe?
Yeah, from my end, I'd like to thank everyone for your attention. I'd just like to stress here that the message is very simple. Malta has started positioning itself in this sector some 20 years ago, has grown quite rapidly and steadily into its own model, which has proved to be successful, notwithstanding the barrage of new regulations we've seen during these 20 years, our own challenges as a country. It's still there, it's still appealing to so many fund promoters coming from different parts of the world. So my invitation is, let's discuss. We're here, open to business, open to discuss. If we have a solution for you, and we do our very, very best to find that, we're here, ready to accommodate.
We're certainly facing many uncertainties nowadays, but I do not believe this will have a long-term negative impact on Malta. Actually, I believe more and more investors, and startup managers, both wanting to relocate, and also new managers. I believe they're going to choose Malta over other jurisdictions, as we've done 15 years ago. I do believe Malta has many advantages.
All right. In conclusion, I'd like to thank Joe, Francesca, and Rebecca as our panelists, and I invite any questions to them that you might have forthcoming.